Hi guys, Mike coming at you again with part 2 of things every IDI owner should know. I had a lot of good feedback from my first video, so I thought I'd make a second one on a lot of the input I received. I know I can't cover everything, but I'm just trying to cover most of the basics, and hopefully this will help a lot of you. I guess starting off, I'll talk about starting. I do not recommend using ether. Now, it's kind of controversial. A lot of guys can do it and do it a quote-unquote safe way. I've just switched to WD-40 because if your glow plugs are cycling and you use ether to start your truck, you can do some head damage, and it just potential to crack a head or something is not worth it for me. So I've since switched to WD-40, and I haven't had an issue using that as a starting aid. I'll also note that if you have to use a starting aid every single time to start your truck, you have another problem going on, whether it be the injection pump, the air intrusion, your glow plug system. You need to do some research, and find out the real problem. Ether or WD every time is kind of the cheap man's way out. Also on starting, some guys just don't know this. There's a nifty little starter relay Ford put on the inner fender there, where you can just take like a screwdriver and whatnot, and you can cross the terminals, and you can manually bump the motor over. It's kind of convenient. Some people don't know that. Also, a good way to bleed air out of the system. I have manually bumped the motor over, and there's a nifty little Schrader valve right on top of the filter housing. You take that cap off, and you can bleed air out of the system, since air collects at the highest point. That's the highest point in the fuel system, so it's a convenient way to bleed air out. Also, talking about the fuel system, a lot of guys ask about the injection pump. There is a little plate on the passenger side of the injection pump where you can turn a screw, and you can crank your fuel up on the pump. Now, if you do this non-turbo or turbo-like, I really highly recommend you get an EGT gauge. It's called an exhaust gas temperature gauge. It monitors your engine temperatures. You can quickly melt pistons if you turn your pump up too high and you're monitoring where your temperatures are at, especially for the naturally aspirated guys. The benefit really comes from having a turbocharger on your truck and having higher fuel flowing through it, but definitely get an EGT gauge. I'll mention something on gauges here in a second too, but also on the fuel system, a nifty little upgrade is the one-piece filter / water separator. That's Fram, part number PS8132. Wix also makes one. I don't know the part number right off my head, but it's convenient because instead of having the water separator from the factory that's screwed onto the bottom there, instead you have a one-piece setup. You just change the filter out entirely, and filter changes. Also on fuel, for a fuel additive, I highly recommend a fuel additive. Modern diesel fuel just does not provide the proper lubricators, and it's really recommended that you get a fuel additive. I use Diesel Clean. I know a lot of other guys do too. It was less than $20 for this bottle, and it says it treats up to 250 gallons. I don't measure out how much I put in. I just do a healthy dose every time I fill up, and I do use this every single time I fill up. And then on top of that, I also use 2-stroke oil. I use about 3/4 to a whole quart for every full tank of fuel I'm filling up. I think I mentioned check your batteries when, especially before winter. Make sure you got good voltage. Need good batteries for winter. Plug your truck in. Make it easier on the glow plugs. Some common overheating problems is either the fan clutch or the thermostat. Steadily overheating normally, like on the highway, my truck was steadily overheating, and it was the fan clutch. But a little cheaper option too, if that's not the issue, to at least check for potential head gasket or what have you, is thermostat. Make sure you get the Motorcraft one. Some guys have still had overheating problems when they went to use the parts store one, but this is the Motorcraft thermostat part number right there. I believe that's it. E5TZ8575-C. I believe that's a part number, but that I cut right off the thermostat box. And obviously, clean off the gasket surfaces. Just kind of thinking out loud. Oh, also, with overheating, don't just trust the little dummy gauges on the dash. I need to get real gauges in my bullnose, but the little, the little C and H and like oil pressure, L and H, that's not a real accurate way to monitor your oil pressure, your engine temperature, your coolant temperature, I should say. I don't have an EGT gauge in this truck, but that's about the only thing I don't have. In fact, it was a major reason I bought this truck is because it had the autometer gauge set already in it. I have oil pressure, coolant temperature, trans temp, and a boost gauge. So autometer is good stuff. It's really cheap to spend the money on a gauge than it is to spend the money on a whole other motor, plus the time and labor if you can't do the work yourself. But if you own a turbo, for the turbo guys, let your motor cool down. Also talking about heat, let that turbo dissipate some of the heat, get fresh oil flowing through it. I don't really let my trucks idle for a good couple minutes before I shut them off, especially like driving on the highway or anything. There's probably more. Like I said, I can't cover everything, but I hope this helps, and I appreciate you guys watching. Bye.